Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Witness and I'm your host, Quatrina Hossain. Some of you remember that a few weeks ago we brought you extensive programming about what was happening in the province of Sindh and some parts of Balochistan. Floods that ravaged the homes of millions. 9 million people were put at risk. Aid came in, some work was done, but here's the new alert. Not enough. And there are still people who are still suffering. We have such a short attention span these days. The news just keeps coming and coming and coming, and we just keep rolling and going along with the flow. But, and here's a huge but, people in Sindh are still homeless. They are not likely to be able to return to their homes anytime in the future, because those of you who saw my shows earlier will remember that I kept standing in the water, which in some places was waist high and other places 25 feet deep when I was in the boat, and I kept saying this water will have to be drained out. There's no place for this water to go. Well, the water has not drained out completely. In fact, it has drained out, it has not drained even half of what had been anticipated. There are problems with that. We are told that a lot of this is simply also being caused by the fact that the water to be drained needs to go through properties that are not inundated, and that's obviously making those people unhappy whose properties will now, or lands will now, get damaged. Well, this is something where the government is going to have to put its foot down and firmly take out the water from whichever natural causeway it can happen. As we told you then, there are 22 natural causeways that have since 1988-89 really been encroached upon. People have built farms, houses, all different kinds of things have happened that has prevented rainwater from flowing out to the ocean like it always did in the past. Well, some tough decisions have to be made. You've got to break some eggs to make that omelette. But one of the most important things over here is the fact that we all, myself included, had once again forgotten the plight of the flood victims. Luckily, there are people in this country who do not forget. There are people whose entire lives are committed and dedicated to making sure that those in need get the help they need. And they join me here in the studio today to remind us that the disaster may have passed, but the effects of that disaster are still very much being felt, and winter is now around the corner. Allow me to introduce my guest in the studio. My first guest in the studio today is Stacey Winston. She is the spokesperson for the United Nations, who has been doing tremendous work in Pakistan, be it floods, be it the IDP disasters, or the earthquake in 2005. My second guest today is Mr. Robin Lodge. He is a Senior Public Information Officer for the World Food Programme. I would remind you that the World Food Programme is part of the United Nations, but they are particularly responsible for distributing food as and where it is needed. And my third guest today is Neva Khan. She is a country director for the well-known international organization Oxfam. Thank you all for joining me here today. And Ms. Winston, thank you for reminding us through this press release that came out from 4 international organizations, including Oxfam and the United Nations. What is going wrong? You say you're running out of funds.
Yes, it is quite disconcerting that we have seen now, 3 months into the disaster, that there's still urgent relief needs in terms of food, water, shelter, and healthcare in particular. The UN launched an appeal in September 18th asking for about $357 million to meet these requirements. Right now we're at 27% of that funding, which is about $98 million. So we're grateful for what's been given, but we need more. The bottom line is that relief supplies are going to be running out within weeks if more funding does not come in, and we need to be able to provide for people. There's still about 70% estimated of people in need of shelter. We have delivered already to almost 500,000 households of shelter, but as you can see, there's still a great need there. Food, I'll let my colleague Robin speak more to food, but almost 3 million people have received food aid, which is very encouraging, but still we know that food has to be replenished frequently.
Absolutely.
So water, about we have about almost 900,000 people have got clean drinking water, but that is a very big concern. People need clean drinking water, and that is our focus. And almost 1 million people have also received essential medicines, which is again ongoing. These are relief needs to sustain people so that they can move into recovery and hopefully go home and begin to rebuild their lives.
This is a tragedy, Ms. Winston. In fact, I'll bring this now to you, Mr. Lodge. The tragedy is that normally you have relief, then you have recovery and rehabilitation, and what I'm really fearful of is that we are still stuck in the relief phase. We haven't been able to go beyond that. Why is that?
Well, at this stage, as you say, we are very much in the relief stage. I mean, basically because those waters are still there. They're showing no sign of receding whatsoever. I mean, I was there quite recently down in Sindh, and it was the one thing that really shocked me, the fact that the water levels are remaining high. The extent of the ruin of the crops is quite shocking, and the fact that people are still trying to eke out a life in the mud. That is particularly shocking, and while the water is there, it'll be extremely difficult to move into early recovery, and for that reason we do plan to continue general food distributions within the region to all the affected areas. We are reaching at present around about sort of 2.9 million people. We would like to bring those numbers down, but at present there's very little opportunity to do so because the needs are not going down.
Absolutely, and that's a really critical part, isn't it? Ms. Khan, one of the other issues that I want to, obviously, all of you to comment on, but health is such a critical issue, and I know Oxfam works on different levels, but the stories that I heard from people were just tragic, particularly for women. I mean, in one camp alone, there were 600 pregnant women while I was there. In one camp in Umarkot, there must be thousands of pregnant women, many, and I heard that stillbirths were really on the rise. I don't know if this is your area of expertise, but what can you tell me about the health situation?
Well, I mean, we're all very concerned about the health situation in Pakistan, and particularly in Sindh and parts of Balochistan as well. In relation to public health, because Oxfam is very much focusing on water, sanitation, hygiene promotion, and emergency food security livelihood. So our key concerns really around public health. And in relation to public health, where we've got around 60% of the population that still haven't received the basics of water and sanitation. And when we take in the cultural factors as well, and particularly for women, where they're not able to, use open spaces, like men and children can.
Absolutely.
Okay, these privacy and honour sort of issues and protection issues are extremely important to women. And that's sometimes I think what we forget. We get so bogged down in statistics about who's doing what or who's not doing what, but we forget behind every story there is behind every face there is a story.
Absolutely.
And that story could be you or me tomorrow. And we have to remember to bring this back down to the people, and everything that we do back down to the people. And in relation to other health issues, I mean, we're very concerned about over 3 million children who are at risk of flood-related, water-related diseases and malnutrition.
Which had already set in while I was there about a month ago. I found a lot of children, particularly who were vulnerable to diarrhea, to waterborne diseases, and there were, thank God, not too many cases of dengue, though I did uncover 2 confirmed cases of dengue in Umarkot, but malaria or other waterborne diseases were definitely there, and the water continues to be stagnant. It's a festering ground for this. What particularly in terms of health issues, is there anything that needs to be done as a stopgap measure, and then longer term, of course, I know we have much more work to do?
Well, certainly at the moment, the main thing is to ensure there's sufficient resources going into the health sector, into the public health sector generally. So, and doing all those, water sanitation sort of interventions and making sure people have access to those very basics. It's about protecting people, with shelter, because
shelter's crucial.
With winter approaching, the rise in chest infections, etc., is going to increase as well. So it's really about trying to look at all those key things that are going to be happening, and to restart now, not just talking about it, but actually making sure that organisations, national organisations, international organisations, the UN agencies, everybody's working together, with the government of Pakistan to really mobilise everybody in the right direction, so that emergency support is getting to the people as quickly as possible.
But Ms. Winston, of course, donor fatigue is a nice sanitized version for the fact that the global community and perhaps even the Pakistani people themselves are not coming forward like they should have. What's behind the donor fatigue? Is it because there have been too many international crises? What's going on?
Yes, that does seem to be the main issue. In speaking with the donors, particularly the large donors that usually provide towards these appeals for the natural disasters, they've said they are trying to go back to their capitals, to advocate back with the capitals, but it's simply an economic stretch right now. It's been an extraordinary number of crises this year, and that's been outstanding. And to try and meet all the needs in the midst of a global economic crisis, they're finding is quite difficult to do. But they continue to lobby from their offices here and going to the field. We've had many donor visits to the relief activities, and we're hoping that by continuing to feed back information of this critical nature of the situation for the people on the ground here, that more funding will in turn be given.
What would you say to the people of Pakistan who are watching the show right now? What would you be telling them? Because I'll be blunt, the people of Pakistan haven't come forward this time like they did last year.
I think that it has to be said, as Neva was saying, there is a story behind every face, and although not everyone can get out there and meet the people and see the suffering firsthand, thankfully programs like yours and the other media outlets are telling the story, and to really take that to heart and to see that people really are struggling to get back on their feet. And I think we have a responsibility to be able to go and to do our part to try and help, and by seeing that although it's not getting the media attention or the international attention in some ways that it deserves, as the floods last year, it may not be as big in terms of scope and scale, but to each individual and to that family, it is a big deal. And that we need to keep advocating for those, and to say, you know, take a look at what the situation really is, and try and empathize, put yourself in the shoes of these people, and be able to give back more generously.
Absolutely. And Mr. Lodge, one of the, of course, critical points in all this is that there are a lot of people, of course, who do want to help, who may not be huge donors in and of themselves, but individuals who are watching the show right now. And last year when the floods came around, or when the earthquake happened in 2005, and you were telling me that you were here in 2005 as well, we thank you for your commitment and support that you've extended. But how would you advise people right now who are watching this program and say, okay, we'd like to do something, but what can they really do? How can they pull together?
Well, if you're talking about individuals actually wanting to help and wanting to support us, the best way is to go online. Because however small your donation, it is gratefully received, and the best way is to go to www.wfp.org, and you will find a way to donate to WFP. As always, our major donors are governments. We're very grateful for the response we've had so far, but unfortunately it is not enough. We are now in a position where we've got enough food to continue for the next few weeks, but really we're talking next month about possible ration cuts, and we really don't want to be talking about that.
We're talking ration cuts at a time when we haven't been able to reach all the people yet.
Well, we probably now have reached all the people that we're targeting, but we've got to continue to reach them. We've got to do second and third rounds of monthly rations, and those rations at present are adequate. But if we don't get the resources, we'd have no option but to cut those rations, and that's something we really don't want to do.
Really don't want to do. And Ms. Khan, of course, the very crucial part about this is that a lot of people are very critical of the government, particularly the provincial government as well as the federal government, for not having acted fast enough on their own behalf to respond adequately to the needs of their people. How fair is that criticism?
I think, you know, when there is such desperation out there, it's very easy to be critical, and the government's an easy target as well. And I think that, you know, our expectations of governments all around the world are quite high, generally. And I mean, I'm just thinking back to, you know, the winter last year when I was back in London, and we only had about, you know, a few inches of snow, and the whole country came to a standstill.
Right.
And we have to remember that in Pakistan, you know, this is not just a one-off disaster. Pakistan is a country that has had series of disaster after disaster after disaster, natural disasters, never mind about going into law and order, you know, situations. Okay, so we have to recognise that Pakistan, for Pakistan, this is not going to be something that's going to go away. Okay, and we have to stop, you know, really trying to change our mindset to a place whereby we're not just thinking about it as a reaction to disasters every time, which costs a significant amount of money. But at the same time, we have to start looking much more strategically at the issues that Pakistan is facing collectively, take responsibility, and to start doing all those preparedness measures that must take place to build the country's resilience to future disasters. And we must see every person in Pakistan not a victim of a disaster or even something that's more positive that's often said, survivors of disasters. We must see them as a resource. Every person in Pakistan is a resource. We can all do something collectively. And from certainly the discussions I've been having on my many visits down to Sindh and to, throughout the country, the feeling I get from all of the people that were involved in the men, women and children, and these are people who are poor people. These are not people who feel they have any influence or power or anything like that. These are just everyday, solid of the earth people who are just trying to do the best they can day by day to make ends meet.
Right.
And my feeling from them and from what I can see them do with very little is that they want to be active participants and active citizens of Pakistan and being part of their own future and their development. And they will do whatever. They're not waiting for handouts to come out. They are going out and doing what they can. Okay, what they need is the support of organisations like you've got around the table, of the government of Pakistan, of the donor community, and Pakistan needs that.
Absolutely.
And we also have to remember that Pakistan is a relatively young country, okay, and the institutions of Pakistan need to be built as well, and we can all play a role in that, okay. The thing is, we've got to be wanting to do that, and we need to do it in a way that we trust each other to play to each other's strengths.
Absolutely.
And work in a common direction.
Couldn't agree with you more. We're going to take a short break here, but we would like to give you a reminder of some of the images that we have shown to you in the past, but I'd like you to look at them again. The situation hasn't changed all that much, so here's a reminder of what's going on in Sindh. Please stay with us. And welcome back to Witness. We once again are reminding you of the floods that have ravaged our own people. Sindh, Balochistan, the people continue to suffer. I will be the first to admit that the media has dropped the ball. We did not keep up the coverage of this issue like we should have. And it took a reminder from 4 international aid organizations warning us that money is running out. They may be forced to cut back on relief operations. Well, you know what? They're not going to say this. They're here as guests with me in the studio, but I'm going to say it. We can't keep depending on the international community to bail us out. We have to get up and do things for ourselves as well. I know that many of you watching this program right now have done a lot of work during the 2005 earthquake, for the IDP crisis, for the floods last year, and I ask you once again, you have to step up to bat one more time. The people in Sindh need you. How you can do that, what you can do that, we will again try to put together our relief efforts that we did last year and try and help you in getting what is needed to the people. But just now, as Mr. Lodge pointed out, if you really don't have the time, ability or commitment to physically go out and do work yourself, then you can definitely donate to the World Food Programme. They are the ones who buy the food, they distribute it. www.worldfoodprogramme.org. So do go onto that website and donate if you can. If not, find a World Food Programme office in your city and go and give them the cash. Because if you can't go out there and give the money yourself, then if you can't go out and distribute food yourself or whatever, you certainly can give it to the people who are making a difference. And the World Food Programme, internationally recognized, you know your money is going to the right place. Mr. Lodge, one of the concerns that people often express to me is the fact that they feel that sometimes when aid is given to people, or they buy things and they give them to the victims of floods or earthquakes or whatever, that sometimes that same stuff ends up in the marketplace. And the recipients are actually selling it. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it?
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, obviously, if it happens on a large scale, we would get concerned, because it means that we're getting the balance wrong somewhere, because basically the food we give should be food that they need to consume themselves. However, if we're, for example, giving wheat flour and rice, and a family happens to prefer rice or wheat flour, we've given it to them. It's theirs to do what they want with. If they want to sell off the rice to buy more wheat flour, there's no reason why they shouldn't do that, as long as it's small scale. If we see it happening on a large scale, then we have to worry that perhaps the food is being diverted before it reaches the beneficiaries. That's another issue entirely. Fortunately, that's not really been happening this time round, but we work in 80 countries around the world. It does happen.
It does happen.
And it's something we have to be on guard
But
against.
it's not happening in Sindh. I did not notice that this year. I did not notice it last year either, in all honesty. I was in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, I was in Punjab last year, but I did not see that. Small scale, yes. And I did ask. I asked somebody and they said, well, we needed cough syrup. So they sold off some food to get cough syrup for the child. And I think that's something you need to know. You know, I mean, we think we're doing such a great job because we're giving, 10 different items and whatever, but somebody just needs, a painkiller. They've got headache, or somebody needs diarrhea medicine, they need ORS or something. So it's okay if a little bit of that they sell to buy something they desperately need. That's not something to worry about. But as Mr. Lodge, you're telling me that if something wide scale happens, then the UN and the World Food Programme would know and step in. You would plug that hole right away, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Well, we answer to our donors, and they would insist on us doing just that.
Absolutely.
And, of course, we ourselves are concerned that we are providing the right amount of food to the right people, the people that really need it. And so we have to be on guard against such malpractices in any case.
Everywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world.
But, I mean, a lot of times, once I've seen things being sold, but then I've asked and they've told me that's why, they needed something else. But I've never seen large-scale diversions or warehouses or whatever. A little bit during the earthquake, but not during the floods. And I think that was such a huge catastrophe that everything was all upset. Ms. Winston, here's a tough part though. Winter's around the corner, and in your press statement you did talk about that. Tell us what are your fears? What is the UN's fear on this?
Yes, we are concerned as the temperatures are dropping and people are without shelter, as we've mentioned, that we need to get people and what organizations such as UNHCR and the International Organization for Migration, among others, and the NGOs such as Oxfam, are delivering extra blankets, extra clothing, things that will help keep people warm, but especially the winterized tents, to provide for the emergency shelter, things that will enable people to carry them through until they can return back home and hopefully be able to have more secure structures.
Because you see, I don't know how it is right now because it's been more than a month since I was there, but people were actually living in shelters that were sewn together out of plastic bags. They had actually put up 4 sticks of some kind and then just put, not even a sheet, I'm talking regular plastic, what you put your garbage out in. And that's what they had stitched together to cover it up, and that was just providing them some shade. At that time it was hot, but now the Sindh gets cold. Sindh gets cold at night. This is a desert area.
It does. And people are extremely resourceful. I think, as Neva was saying, people are very resilient. They are very much wanting to be part of this effort to recover and rebuild. And the Pakistani people are extremely strong, and they'll use whatever means they can, but it is our responsibility to be able to provide more so that they can have what they need to survive as the colder temperatures are arriving.
And I know this is sort of a bit out of your purview, but I'm going to ask all 3 of you to tell me a horror story of something you saw, because I saw so many what I would say were horror stories, and one uplifting story to sort of balance it out. So what was one of the worst things you've seen in the floods there, or heard from somebody?
Well, I think what I had seen, I'd seen the face of malnutrition, which I think the last floods really exposed how severe and how widespread. I mean, numbers that are equivalent and even worse than some countries in Africa, which I think was quite surprising for people to hear. And so,
shocking.
Yeah, and I think what we found though, that is with in visiting a UNICEF and WHO basic health center mobile clinic, if the children receive the supplementary feeding and the nutrient packets that are given. I saw a beautiful little girl, Amna, and she was extremely tiny at 8 months old, but the UNICEF doctor there said, as they were handing her mum these packets of the micronutrients, that if in 15 days, he said, you'll see a different Amna. I mean, she will be better. And I think that's the thing, that if we can, you know, help combat this malnutrition, at least with this emergency scale, and again, why more resources are needed to do so. So there's a sad story, but hopefully with a happy ending.
That's the thing, is that it's hard. Mr. Lodge, it's hard. You know, some of the things I've seen, I'm sure you, what is, you just mentioned you were down there recently.
Yes, indeed. I mean, there have been so many sort of depressing scenes that I've seen. And again, you know, you talk about people's resilience, and which has been incredibly impressive. But I was immensely saddened when I looked at an elderly woman who'd obviously gone through an awful lot in life. You know, life had never been as easy, living that kind of existence, hard work for all those many years. And she was just sitting there looking at the remains of what had been her home. I mean, there was nothing really left, just flooded out. And you think, you know, couldn't she just be allowed to live out her remaining years in comfort and dignity? And that saddened me enormously. But then again and again, when when I've seen families' determination to carry on, you know, they're not going to give up. They're not going to just sit there and say, well, it's not worth living. They're going to rebuild. They're going to carry on. And I've been impressed again and again by the toughness and resilience of the people I've come across.
Yeah, one of the things, Ms. Khan, before I let you tell your story, I went to a sort of a little island. I don't know if island is the right word. It was just a little bit of high ground that had been left in the Badin area and water all around. And there were 4 men living there. Because they were guarding the property, and I said, well, it's all underwater. And to me, the most touching part of that was that he was drying his children's school books that they were able to save. So, you know, that whole thing about the resilience. I mean, and of course, I remember I picked up the book, and the first thing on it in Sindhi, it said international justice. And it was just so ironic, you know, I mean, it just kind of struck me. But there you go, you know, the people really, they're trying to save what they can. But what are your stories? What have you seen and heard?
Well, there's so many of them, you know, and I'm not going to go for a horror story, I'm afraid. I'm going to talk more about perhaps something that we sometimes forget about, and that's the number of people, particularly women, who have lost their dignity, okay? You know, people are proud, and, you know, because of natural disasters, they have now really, you know, through no fault of their own. This is something they didn't have any control over. And for many, not for the first time either. Okay, this is now the second time many people have been compounded by a flood as well. Okay, the second time. But just the whole loss of dignity in those very personal habits for women, the hygiene, not having the privacy, as I said earlier on, you know, to be able to bathe, to have to, you know, tell somebody like myself who's a stranger to them, who's just visiting, how, you know, they were delighted to get their latrines, you know, because it meant they didn't have to, you know, really, you know, suffer all through the day waiting for darkness to come before they could find somewhere safe to go, you know, and even then, you know,
and let's just talk about a couple of things that people who have not been in the field, you know, Sindh, particularly Umarkot and Mirpur Khas, this area has a lot of snakes. There's water everywhere. So the snakes and other wildlife have also come on to the dry ground. So going into the field, or what's left of a field at night, means that you're sharing that with the wildlife, with the snakes, with the scorpions, with the centipedes. It's a horror.
Yeah, and also just, you know, just the love that comes out when they talk as well, because I mean, you know, women. I've talked a lot to women in particular for obvious reasons, and you know, the women, you know, talking about how, you know, that they haven't got mosquito nets, they can't protect themselves at night from insects, and they find it really hard to sleep, and that's just something simple, okay, and how they're fanning their children, okay, during the night so the children can sleep, okay. The men folk, you know, many of them are trying to protect their livestock from the same problems, okay, and trying to keep the, you know, the insects away from, particularly mosquitoes, from their livestock that have survived, and you know, during the day they have to try and find ways to keep awake as well, to make sure that they're not going into things that they're going to cause them risk, okay. So they keep an eye on the children, and you know, the love that's out there is amazing, and you know, despite the situations they find themselves in, you know, they are trying to maintain a dignity, and I think think that, you know, that's something we have to remember. That, you know, this is why we have to get support out to them, and we have to get support very quickly out to make sure that people can live with dignity and get those very basics. Okay, food, water, shelter, you know, hygiene, sanitation, water, you know, these are just basics.
The basics.
That every one of us,
that are
you know,
missing.
how would we feel if we couldn't do that?
Exactly.
I mean, I know myself how much I would
you know,
feel.
when I was out there, you know, it was really hard. I mean, I've never actually said this on air before, but one of the biggest problems I had was that there were bugs in the food all the time because they're just everywhere, and they dive bomb into even an omelette if you're eating it. And so finally I was reduced to just having packet juice and biscuits, because that at least I knew it was safe. But Mr. Lodge, this is one of the really important things, of course. I know it's not your particular field, but we have to talk about it. The crops. The crops have really been destroyed. I noticed the sugarcane crop was gone, the red chili crop was gone. These were cash crops. The wheat crop, some of it was harvested, not a lot. The rice crop, I don't know too much about. Now, I realize this is not your area of expertise, but what can you tell us about the harvest and what is the long-term impact of what has happened in Sindh here?
Well, I think the main concern right now is planting rather than harvest.
Right.
I mean, essentially, and we're talking particularly about the wheat crop right now.
It should have been planted right now,
well,
right?
it should have been planted, and we're talking about prime planting around about 15th of November, so, you know, it's now we're talking about, basically. And in so many areas, there's absolutely no question. It is not happening. It won't happen.
At least about a foot to 2 feet of water in most places still.
And even where the water might have vanished, the ground is waterlogged. You put seed in that ground, that seed will rot.
It's going to rot. Yeah.
So, you know, you cannot plant. There are people who are talking to me saying it's going to be 6 months before we can plant. If you're talking about 6 months, you're talking about a whole crop.
Absolutely, a whole season. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's a livelihood as well.
That is a livelihood as well. Exactly.
Also the cattle. You know, I saw a lot of dead cattle on the road. Apart from that, I was told that a lot of the livestock had simply been buried to prevent disease. But that livestock was also a means of livelihood. Replenishing those herds is not going to be easy, is it?
Replenishing the herds is not going to be easy. Keeping the herds supplied with fodder when you don't have access to grass is going to be a big problem as well. I know that various aid agencies are making efforts in that direction. As you say, it's not my area of expertise, so I can't give details on that, but this is a major concern, absolutely.
Right. Ms. Winston, just to follow up a little bit on that, again, I know that, you know, we wanted to have somebody here with us who was a specialist in this, but unfortunately he wasn't available, so we will, of course, come into detail on that. But a complaint that I heard repeatedly from people at that time was, and as you're mentioning, the people trying to keep mosquitoes away from their animals, there is disease in the animals there, and a lot of people are talking to me about and this is something that I also found strange. I found a lot of freshly dead, I mean, that's the only word I can use for it, corpses of animals that should not have been there because the floods had happened well before the time that I went there. That means animals are dying. Have you received any reports of that? Because I'm told that particularly cattle becomes disoriented and then kind of keels over. So I'm scared. I'm thinking mad cow disease. I mean, I'm no expert. Have you heard anything about this?
I haven't as much, but I know that as part of the relief plan in the UN humanitarian community rapid response plan, and included is for the agriculture is the livestock care, and that they are having veterinarians and other veterinarian care professionals going out as part of this agriculture and livelihood refurbishment within the projects to be able to help care for the animals, to be able to help the owners of the animals know how to care for the animals, and to try and provide for the health care of the animals, as well as you know, their feed and medicines and things of that nature. So that is built into this plan of the livelihood recovery efforts,
We are going to take a break, but once again I leave you with images illustrating what we've just been talking about. You have to remember that these issues, I keep using the phrase you have to remember, because I don't know how to convey to you the desperate need of these people that still hasn't gone away. So please do stay with us, and we'll be right back after this break. and welcome back to Witness. One of the things that I saw and I found a little strange when I was driving around in Sindh during the floods is that I knew, of course, that families were living in these flimsy plastic bag shelters. I don't even use the word tents for those. They were living on the side of the road. And I noticed that they had taken regular kikar, you know, the kikar, that thorn brushes, they're like thorns, thorny things, and they had put those all around their tents, and they were sort of half on the road, half just off the shoulder of the road, but these are narrow roads, and so I thought maybe they had those there to keep wild animals away or something. But it was only when I was driving there at night that I realized that they had put those there for protecting themselves from people driving on the roads, because you can't really see these shelters, these flimsy tents where people are living, sleeping, their children. So they actually surround themselves with these thorn bushes to protect themselves from the human predators in our vehicles. So that's a really sad thought, and it's still out there. So, you know, we really do have to help. But of course, Ms. Khan, as we were talking during the break, that not everyone is still out on the roads. So some people are going back, but it's not easy.
No, not at all. I mean, yes, I mean, because the desperate conditions people are living in, the way, you know, a lot of assistance still isn't reaching people, you know, who are on the banks and all sorts of areas. As soon as the water is going down, people are in pockets all over the place. You've got small locations all dotted around the place. So as soon as you know, people feel that the water is going down enough, they are moving back to their villages, and they're trying to start rebuilding their lives, you know, back in their villages. And if we're going to, you know, sort of avoid a public health crisis and you know, a food and nutrition sort of a crisis, then we must ensure that we're not just focusing on those who are still in areas which are flooded at the moment, where the water's not draining, but are also ensuring that the emergency basic needs are being met when people are going back to their homes as well. And again, it's those food, the water, sanitation, shelter, all those basics that we're talking about. And again, accessing healthcare. People need to be able to access healthcare so that when they're sick, they've got somewhere that they can go to in a timely and efficient fashion that will be able to address their health needs.
And sometimes it's as simple as a diarrhea, which can be fatal if not treated. And diarrhea is so easily treatable. That's what, you know, makes me so sad, that a life can be lost for the lack of a small bottle of oral rehydration. Mr. Lodge, here's of course the other part, and I've from both of you, if you could comment on that. The water supply is definitely contaminated. The wells are contaminated. Sindh is predominantly based on wells in the rural areas. Is there any technical way that these wells have to be cleaned or something? I mean, I don't know, because I actually tasted the water as and when in different places, and I did pay the price for that. But those wells need to be cleaned up. How does that happen?
I'm sure they need cleaning up. Again, it is not my area. My area is food, but I'm quite sure it makes perfect sense. I mean, with all this stagnant water lying around, you know,
with dead animals in it.
Dead animals, you know that sewage is flowing into it. It's quite clear that some big clean-up of water supply has to be involved here. But I can't say how it's going to be done, how much it would cost.
But water purification tablets, is that part of the World Food Programme's
We don't deal with water purification, but one thing we do is when we are giving supplementary food to very small children, up to 23 months of age, we are giving out these sachets. They are manufactured in Pakistan. It's called Wawaman. And it's a supplementary Wawamam.
Okay.
And it is designed as supplementary food for very small children, and basically they don't need to add water. You suck it straight out of the sachet, so therefore it is safe to use even in areas of water contamination, and this is absolutely crucial.
Wawamam.
Yes.
Remember that, Wawamam. That's what we need to get out there. Ms. Winston, I'll give you the last few words, of course, because you are representing the United Nations, which looks after all the UN agencies, UNICEF, UN Women. Which particular community do you think needs the most urgent attention right now? When I say community, I mean, obviously we know children and women are vulnerable, but is there something that we need to be doing on a larger level for those people who are watching this program? I keep coming back to that, for people who are watching this program, particularly immediately vulnerable segments of population?
Yeah, I do think that is, you've hit the two main segments of the population, the women, the children, and I would say the elderly and the disabled. People that are often, you know, are struggling in an everyday, and then when hit with a disaster. And I think those communities particularly that have been twice hit, from the floods of 2010 and now again, and we have reports of up to 35% of this current flood affected communities are doubly hit. That's over 1/3 of the total population. So looking at those who were just barely getting back on their feet into the early recovery, and then bang, hit again from these floods.
And what are the repercussions if people do nothing?
What are the repercussions?
If people do nothing.
That I think is, it's looking after each other, and I think we have to think about the people that if they, how will they be able to survive and move on? I think that the resilience is being tested. How far can we test it? I mean, they are extremely, the people are extremely resilient, but we need to be there to help each other.
Absolutely. You're not saying, I guess, send what I will, because you have to be, I understand, somewhat diplomatic, but I unfortunately do not have diplomacy on my mind at the moment. But first I'd like to thank my guests, Stacey Winston, Robin Lodge and Neva Khan, for having taken part in today's very important program. I thank you for your time, and not just your time in today's program, but the time and commitment that you have shown here in Pakistan for looking after the people. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I will say what Stacey Winston and the others perhaps are too polite to say. The consequences of doing nothing are right there in front of us. We will see an increase in malnutrition. We will see an increase in people dying. We will see an increase in disease. We will see an increase in crime. Yes, there will be an increase in crime. If we don't look after the people, they will have to do whatever it takes to survive. That's the human spirit. Apart from resilience, it's survival. Let's not push people to the point where they have to take things into their own hands. We do have the ability to help people. You do. I know you do. So please, let's once again come together and help out those people in need. I know many of you are saying, how long can we do this? My answer to you for that would be as long as it takes. And I promise you here now that you're watching this show, but very soon I will return to Sindh and I will give you an update from all those places which I had visited earlier, and I will tell you once again what is happening over there. But for tonight, I'll leave you now with images of what has been happening. We have shown you those through the program as well, and I will leave you with simple words. We will not forget. Quatrina Hossain saying Khuda Hafiz from Islamabad.